It is one of the most haunting and mystifying scenes in the annals of true crime. A car crashed on a dark, lonely road in the middle of a winter night. The doors are locked. The engine is running. A box of wine sits on the passenger seat. Inside, a purse and wallet are untouched. But the driver, a bright, promising young woman, is gone. She vanished into the cold New England air without a trace, leaving behind a digital and physical trail of bizarre clues that have puzzled investigators and amateur sleuths for 2 decades. She had recently been arrested for using a stolen credit card, an act completely out of character for her. She was in a long-distance relationship that was under strain. The next day, a Sunday, she spoke with her father, who was in town. He told her not to worry about the car accident. They would sort it out. That evening, she spoke on the phone with her boyfriend. The conversation was normal, but something had changed for Mara. She went to a liquor store and purchased a box of Franzia wine and several bottles of liqueur. Then, just before 4 p.m., she got into her black 1996 Saturn sedan and drove north. Alone, heading towards the mountains. She didn't tell a soul where she was going. He drove the short distance to his home and made the call. The entire interaction had lasted only a few minutes. By the time the first police officer arrived on the scene, less than 10 minutes after Atwood's call, the black Saturn was there, its engine running, its doors locked. And just 2 days before she vanished, she was involved in a car accident, crashing her father's brand new car. A search with tracking dogs followed her scent for about 100 yards down the road before it abruptly stopped. Completely. This led police to the dominant theory that Mara had walked a short distance down the road and was picked up by a passing vehicle. The box of wine was there, with a significant amount missing. She planned the entire event to start a new life, perhaps in Canada. Fearing a DUI charge, especially after her recent legal troubles, she ran from the scene to hide from the approaching police. That the person who picked her up on that dark road was not a friend, but a killer. Several local residents with criminal pasts have been looked at as persons of interest over the years, but no solid evidence has ever linked anyone to her disappearance. In this scenario, she fled into the dense, dark woods, became lost, and tragically died of exposure in the harsh winter conditions. But extensive searches have never found any remains. He believes something criminal happened to her on that road. He has spent 2 decades chasing down leads, convinced that someone in that small New Hampshire community knows what happened to Mara. In this scenario, she had a friend waiting nearby to pick her up, and she has been living under a new identity ever since. Her father has always vehemently rejected this idea. Was she running away from her life, or running towards a new one? Did she meet with a tragic accident or a monstrous human being? 20 years later, the road is still dark, the woods are still silent, and Mara Murray is still gone. She lied about a death in the family, a clear sign of a planned escape. But she crashed her car, an unplanned event that would have thrown any plan into chaos. But the scene was not typical. Police found a Coke bottle that apparently contained a red liquid with a strong alcoholic smell. They found the printed MapQuest directions, but they found no Mara. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the dark road, and the terrifying idea that a person can simply cease to exist. She stepped out of her running car with her purse and phone inside. And in the space of less than 10 minutes, she was gone forever. The windshield was cracked and both airbags had deployed. But Mara Murray was gone. She had vanished into the thin, freezing air. She used her personal computer to search MapQuest for directions to the Berkshire Mountains in Massachusetts and to Burlington, Vermont. She called to inquire about renting a condominium in Bartlett, New Hampshire, an area her family had vacationed in when she was a child. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a typical accident. It was something else entirely. Or was it something far more sinister? A massive online community of amateur detectives has picked apart every detail of her life and her disappearance, generating countless theories. Was it an opportunistic predator who saw a young woman in a vulnerable situation and offered her a ride only to abduct and kill her? She also packed her college textbooks. She emailed her professors and her work supervisor, telling them she would be gone for a week due to a death in the family. Her family confirms there was no death. This was a complete lie. She looked out her window and saw a car, Maura's black Saturn, spun out and crashed into a snowbank on a sharp, hairpin turn. Another resident, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood, stopped at the scene. It was a disappearance so perfect, so complete, that it continues to defy all explanation. He asked her if she needed help, if he should call the police. The woman, who seemed cold but not visibly injured, said no. She claimed she had already called AAA for a tow truck, a claim that phone records would later prove was a lie. There was no cell service in that remote area. This is the story of a young woman who drove toward a mountain range for reasons no one understands, crashed her car on a desolate road, and then simply stepped out of her life and disappeared forever. This is the story of Maura Murray. Maura Murray was, by all accounts, a superstar. She was a gifted athlete, a West Point cadet, and at the time of her disappearance, a promising nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Maura was working her campus security job when her supervisor noticed she was distraught. In the early hours of the morning, her supervisor found her in a state of shock, completely catatonic, and had to escort her back to her dorm room. Maura would only say the words, "My sister." She was intelligent, driven, and loved by her family. To understand the mystery of February 9, 2004, you first have to understand the woman at its center. But in the weeks and days leading up to her disappearance, Maura's life had become complicated. Then, on the night of Saturday, February 7th, something happened that remains a key piece of the puzzle. To this day, no one knows for sure what happened on that phone call or what caused her breakdown. On Monday, February 9th, she began to make a series of strange and inexplicable preparations. She packed a bag with toiletries, makeup, and several days' worth of clothes. She then went to an ATM and withdrew $280, nearly all the money in her bank account. Around 7:30 that evening, on a dark, snow-lined road in Haverhill, New Hampshire, a local resident named Faith Westman heard a loud thump outside her house. He saw a young woman who matched Maura's description outside the car. Atwood, feeling something was not right, knew he had to call the police anyway. The purse was inside. The cell phone and credit cards were there. The initial search assumed she was a simple crash victim who had wandered off, perhaps disoriented and succumbed to the elements. There were no footprints in the deep snow surrounding the car, suggesting she had stayed on the road. But who was driving that vehicle? Was it a friend? A tandem driver who had been traveling with her as part of her plan to run away? Over the years, the case has become one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of the digital age. One theory is that Maura, overwhelmed by her personal problems, simply chose to disappear. Another theory is that she was drunk and disoriented from the crash. The darkest theory is that she was the victim of foul play. The case is a maze of contradictions. She packed for a week-long trip, but also brought her college textbooks, suggesting she planned to return. Her father, Fred Murray, has been a relentless force in the search for his daughter, often criticizing the police investigation and pushing for more resources. The story of Maura Murray endures because it touches upon our deepest fears. Her car was a time capsule, a final frozen moment of her life, but the story it tells is one we still do not understand.